And all of a sudden, man, I just hear it. I hear like the sound of like just somebody getting stabbed. You know, you can just hear the poking.
What's up, everybody? I'm Blessed and Free. Welcome back to another episode of DOC TV. So 15,000 subscribers. Hey, man, big salute to everybody who has supported the channel, who has subscribed, liked the videos, dropped comments. I appreciate it. If you're new and you're tuning in, though, on this channel, we talk about jail, prison, crime, corruption, and all that type of stuff. So if you like that type of content, hit that subscribe button. Real quick, for the people that don't know you, man, just go ahead and introduce yourself and tell them where you're from and everything.
Yeah, my name is Rob Mason, and I am from Kalamazoo, Michigan, located Southwest Michigan, pretty much smack in between Detroit and Chicago.
So is that a rough part, or is that like the suburbs?
No, it's like, well, the city of Kalamazoo is, it's a city. It's not a big city, but it's not a town. It's a small city. It's a big college town, but it's definitely got its parts. And I think a lot of that has to do with sitting in between Detroit and Chicago. It's always been that way.
Yeah.
It's
I've heard that. That's why I asked that. What was your lifestyle like, man? Like leading up, like when you were growing up, like what kind of kid were you? And like, how did you go from that kid and then eventually catching charges that sent you to prison?
Man, it's crazy. Growing up, I had a very good childhood. I was blessed. I came from a two-parent household. My dad worked a lot. He was a project manager at a big automotive company. And then he had a landscape business on the side, which all of us kids and cousins and stuff worked for. But it must have been about my freshman year, my parents separated, and my dad moved out and then ended up moving back in my senior year. They reconciled. So I had those, looking back, and I'll never blame any of my problems on anybody but myself. I hold myself accountable for what I'm about to tell you. But I think, during those years, I had a lot of freedom, man. And my parents always viewed, I was an athlete, basketball, hockey, soccer, whatever, man. I tried to do it all, but really basketball and soccer. And I planned on taking that further after school, but I think that social life caught up with me during those years. And that's kind of where the slope began for me. Not hard drugs, but just a lot of smoking weed, a lot of partying, running with the guys and stuff, and partying with all the people in our class. And it's the one thing about the area I grew up in outside of Kalamazoo. It's a prominent area. It's kind of like the wealthier burbs of Kalamazoo, a little ways out of Kalamazoo. But I didn't grow up with that lifestyle. I come from a blue collar family. And, so a lot of my friends watching them grow up, they had the world at their fingertips. And I'm not going to say I didn't, because I think I did.
But compared to what they had, you were like the lower man on the totem pole type shit.
Yeah, as far as if you wanted to look at it like that, as far as like the how would you say it, the financial background I came from with my family and stuff, we were middle class, living in a very upper class area. I live in a place called Gull Lake, and it's a huge lake community. The lake's about 7 miles long by 2 miles wide, with 2 to 3 houses surrounding it. And that's where you get most of the folks with money living. But the school district's huge, and you veer off 2 or 3 miles in any direction, and then you're kind of in the country, unless you're heading towards Kalamazoo. So
what were the charges that ended up sending you to prison?
Okay. So for my first time in, I caught a federal case, and it was mail theft and bank fraud. I had
what's the rundown with that?
Okay. So it's crazy, man. And I won't go too deep into it, but my dad's landscape business, and I carried a lot of shame with me for a long time because of this, but he had a lot of wealthy customers that I worked for from the time I was a kid, that trusted me with, they'd go out of town, I'd get their mail for them, whatever. They knew me from the time I was a little guy. And I'd done well, and our family carried a good reputation out here always. My dad grew up in this area, and my aunts and uncles. And but long story short, I had a couple bad accidents. I was into the rockets, into the riding and all that, took a couple dumps. So I started dabbling with the painkillers. This was really before Oxycontin was out there and going. And I never really got into the oxys. It was just, I had a plug. Well, at first, after my accidents, let me rewind that. You know, doctors weren't being so harsh on like all the withholdings from prescribing them. It hadn't blown up yet.
Right.
So
you could get them from any doctor at that point.
And I was getting a ton of them. I had like 3 different doctors writing me just huge scripts per month. It didn't happen right overnight. But what I noticed is that, you know, I was a 2-time college dropout by this point, quit playing basketball, didn't quit playing, but quit playing, you know, for school or after school. Watching my friends graduate, get married, and I was still stuck in that party realm, you know?
Did you take pain pills before this accident you got in, or did you just get in the accident and then you got prescribed them and then you started taking them?
One time in my life, man, I had my wisdom teeth out when I was like 21. And I remember it like it was yesterday. I remember driving down the road and it said, you know, take 1 every 4 to 6 hours. Well, of course, I took 3.
Right.
And I remember being in my car and looking over at my buddy. We're on our way to a concert in Kalamazoo that night. I remember looking over at him and being like, man, I'm high right now, you know? And he was like, well, what are you talking about? And I'm like, I'm high. And it was just that feeling. I'll never forget that feeling. But after that, I put him away for years. You know, that was just that one script, and I never messed with him again until my accidents.
So how long after the accident, when you got prescribed these pills and you're taking them and you're going about your life? Because I'm assuming you started committing crimes because of taking the pills, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I've been arrested 17 times, and all of them were, you know, just petty crimes. Driving. I mean, about 11 out of those are driving on suspendeds, all due to the crotch rocket scene. So, you know, they take my license, and growing up out here, there's 2 or 3 county sheriffs that patrol the area, and I used every sneaky back. Yeah, there was no use in running, man. I just pulled over. And
were your charges though based on like your addiction? Like how did the bank fraud and the mail fraud come in?
So I had a customer who was you know, and I don't say this in a way to, like, I guess the word would be to glorify or to minimize it, but I would say that he was very well off and at an older age, kind of unorganized. And I would get his mail when he was out of town. And this is, I'd had my scripts from the doctors, and then they kind of saw a pattern with me to where I was, you know, getting early refills, doing all the stuff, the telltale sign of an addict, you know, in progress and just about to bloom. So I got hooked on the painkillers. I was taking about 70 Vicodin a day, the 10 milligrams of Norcos. Yeah, I'm lucky. And amazingly, you know, I've had tests. I still ball. I still play sports. I'm healthy. I'm blessed, man, because I could have just ripped my insides apart. But so what I ended up doing was, in this man's house, there was a huge leather-bound checkbook full of checks that he'd write out of his trust, which had millions of dollars in it. And I started taking a check here and there from the back of the book, and I would write them to myself. It started out like $900, you know, and then as my addiction grew worse, my greed definitely got the best of me. And I would walk into my bank with checks for like 7 or 8 grand. And I concocted a story because addicts were smart people. And, you know, I told them that I was buying classic cars at the auction, and this was my financial backer. And so they never questioned me at my bank when I just walk in. And I made sure never to go over $10,000. But, you know, I'd always push the limit on that. And one time turned into like 80 some times over the course of 2 years. Damn, and it was supposed to be a one-time thing. You already know how that goes. I mean, one time turns into 2.
I know how that goes. 50. Yeah. 80 though. That's overboard, bro. You were like, holy shit.
And by the end of it, man, by the time the feds showed up at my house and the U.S. Postal Inspector, a couple agents, and 2 marshals to serve me a complaint, they confiscated my passport and had me turn over my weapons, which were at my dad's house. I had 2 pistols, and they gave me the option to either sell them and produce a receipt within 7 days back to the gun shop or turn them in. Ended up selling them, giving them my passport. And then they're like, they just bounced. They were like, look, man, do you have a lawyer? And I was like, I'm probably going to need one. I'm going to get one. They're like, yeah, you need one. And they're like, and don't plan on running because we're the feds. And, you know,
yeah, you ain't running from them.
No, they're like,
not for long anyways.
No, and they were cool too, man. I mean, they told me, they said, look, you want to run from us? We'll just tack on an extra 5. So, you know.
How much time did you end up getting for the 80 like bank frauds?
Yep. So they dropped it down. I took a plea deal to 1 count and my guidelines were 24 to 36 months. But since I'd never had a felony on my record and I had in the Western District of Michigan, and it's kind of known, she's one of the more compassionate judges in the federal criminal division. And on my day of sentencing, I went in there and I was still all messed up from my accident. You know, I was very fortunate. My community kind of rallied behind me, even though, man, I mean, it came out on the news and it ran on the news for like 3 days and people were blown away. I was the last person people thought would have ever done this. I put on a good show. And, you know, I look back at it and I think, man, I can't believe I did that. But, you know, drugs will do that. So
you got 24 months?
Yeah, no, I got sentenced. The prosecutor recommended 24 months, low end of the guideline, no felonies. And they wanted me out to pay back my restitution. No violent crimes or anything like that. But I'd had a whole slew of slap on the wrist, you know. And at my sentencing, she downward departed to 18 months, and which we didn't know what was going to happen. It was a blessing. I got up and spoke, and I spilled the beans and admitted to everything. You know, it's one of those things like I think what I said was sincere enough because I meant it. I think that played into it a little bit, but I also think I really lucked up pulling that judge. I don't know, man. By the grace of God, I got a good judge.
So what was your first prison that you landed at?
Oh, boy, man, it was banging. And now this is coming from somebody who'd never been to prison. But now that I've been to, you know, a handful of them, I can look back at it. And Fort Dix has a camp and it also has a minimum security. It's right on Fort Dix Army Base, McGuire Air Force Base out in New Jersey. But that low is ran like a disciplinary low. It's more like a medium. Everything is controlled. Do you know how you hear a lot of guys say that lows, you can just run outside the door anytime you want and run all over? Yeah, not at this place.
I heard it's more like lows have more like snitches and chomos and shit like that.
That was a hard one to choke down. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of that. And, you know, and then me being a white dude from Kalamazoo, blonde hair and blue eyes. Luckily, I surrendered with my PSI, my paperwork, and I had no co-defendants. You know, I was no rat stuff in there, so it was pretty smooth to give it to, like, there weren't a lot of Michigan guys there, but once I got it to the ones that were, you know, and word got around, then things smoothed up real quick.
So you ran with the Michigan car then? Is that who?
No, man. I hear all these people say that, and my story is completely different, man. Like, there weren't a lot of Michigan dudes in there. The ones that were in there were from Detroit, and I'm a West Sider on the state. You know, I'm Kazoo, Grand Rapids. I'm not from the D.
So who do you run with then?
In there, I was lucky, man. I was in a 12-man room, and I had the guy on the bunk next to me on the bottom bunk was one of the head guys of the Muslim Brotherhood in there, which pretty much runs that prison.
Did you go Muslim, bro?
No.
Okay.
No. I'm Christian. I'm Christian,
right.
bro.
I'm like, oh man, no.
No. I didn't.
I mean, hey, if that's your belief, but in Florida, man, if you're a white boy and you go Muslim, you're doing it because you're either getting, like, you know, protection, or you're somebody's, you know, fuck
you're
toy.
Somebody,
yeah,
right, or you're getting your ass extorted the hell out. So no.
So when you were in federal prison, how does that shit work? Was that shit going down?
Yeah, but I mean, you had to be slipping, you know. Like, for me, I always say this, and I told you I was writing a book. And I've had to put it on hold because, man, so many things have happened in my life and I got to incorporate that into the book. So it seems like every year something drastic happens, whether it's I just lost my father, a lot of relatives. I went through a divorce, and But there's a whole chapter in there on how I made it through federal prison. And the key word is basketball, man. I was so naive when I went to Fort Dix that once I started walking around on the compound, I'd healed up from my injuries and stuff. And I wasn't 100%, but I started playing basketball right away at rec all the time. And I was like the only white dude out on the court playing, and they're like, man, this dude, not toot my own horn, but this dude can hoop, What I didn't understand was I was naive, and I didn't understand I was putting myself out there because nobody has anything to do in there. You jump in the league or on a team, or you're out there. You don't want to embarrass anybody. That's for sure.
What do you mean when you said like you put yourself out there? What do you mean by that?
I think like I put myself out there instead of laying low and just kind of getting to know the prison.
Oh, okay,
I wasn't going to be in there that long, but I couldn't sit still, man. I had to do something,
Yeah, you were in a position which creates waves in different areas. You know what I'm saying?
It does, man. And I always say that basketball saved my life because it got me in with every different ethnic group in there because they'd go watch the basketball games at night. They didn't have anything else to do. And here I am out there hooping. And that's where I had my first couple fights. And I think, after you get into your first couple fights, people kind of realize, all right, I'm not going to try this guy because,
So, all right. So you got in a couple fights. What was the scariest moment for you in prison? Like during your bid?
Oh, easy, man. And it didn't happen to me, but so you go into the A&O building, the orientation building for about 25 days to 30 days. And then they boot you out to your housing unit. My first week in my housing unit, I was blessed to have a great 12-man room. It was very diverse, but we got along good. And our room was right across from the bathroom. And, the doors don't lock inside the unit. They're just wooden doors you can open. I shoot right across to the bathroom and I'm in there brushing my teeth at the middle sink. I'm still pretty naive to prison and everything. I'm adjusting okay, but pretty naive. And all of a sudden, man, I just hear it. I hear like the sound of like just somebody getting stabbed. You can just hear the poking. And I look next to me. And there's like 3 Latino dudes just mauling another Latino dude, just stabbing him up. And before it even hits me, I got blood on me. They ripped him. And so I shot across the hall to my room with like blood on my shirt, and they're like, get your shirt off. You don't want to be in this or whatever. So I changed shirts and they're like, what happened? I'm like, dude, this kid's getting stabbed in the bathroom. So everyone runs out or whatever. I thought about that. That was years ago, man. That was in 2008, my first time in, and then I ended up going back, which we'll get into real quick or down the road here. But, so, I don't think I realized how close I was to being in the mix of that, because I didn't know what was going on, man. I didn't know that a dude was going to it's a low, but man, don't get me wrong. That place, I went to another low on my violation. Nothing like Fort Dix. Fort Dix was insane.
Well, to somebody like a convict that's used to doing time, when they talk about federal prison, like to them, a low is not shit. But for you, never being in prison ever, and you land not only in prison, but you're in federal prison and you're in a low, like, so to you, probably the normal shit like shocked you, you know what I mean? Because that type of shit, as you know, goes on like every day in there. So
it does, and it happened numerous times while I was in there. I think just seeing it though, being so close to it and realizing, it made me start to think a little bit like, man, am I putting myself out there by playing ball too much? Am I, I'm a short timer. I already know pretty much when I'm going home. And, I try to keep that under wraps too, because, I'm in there. I respect my bunkies, all of them. And my roommates, I guess you could call it, or whatever, cellmates. And, even though we weren't in cells, but, I respected the time that some of them had long sentences. Some were doing life and it just worked their ways down to the low because they were old and they'd had good behavior,
Yeah.
And so I had to be very respectful of that. And I did respect that. But,
did you ever get beat up when you were in prison?
No. I never got beat up.
Good.
Yeah. I grew up, even though I grew up in this area, I kind of grew up in the area in my little neighborhood where all the bullies were. So when we were kids, you know, we were playing yeah, that's what we did. We'd meet, you know, every morning on summer break at the bottom of this hill in our neighborhood and get in a circle of 10 kids, and whoever got shoved in had to fight, you know.
Yeah,
and
I
it
know,
wasn't
I know all about those days, man. So when you were in federal prison, man, and you're riding your time out, did you have your family supporting you when you were down? Like, did you have anybody that was there for you, or like, how was that type situation for you?
Yeah, I did. You know, I had my parents I think my parents knew my heart. You know, they saw me for many years do well in school and excel in sports. And, you know, I think they felt very shocked and almost put blame on themselves for not being able to recognize it. But I always tell them there's nothing they could do to have stopped what I was doing.
So would you say that drugs are the main like culprit of why you went to prison to begin with?
Oh yeah. I mean, for sure. And then again, once again, I don't like to say like, you know, because nobody was shoving those pills down my throat except me, you know? So, but had I not been on drugs, would I have ever taken a cent from anybody? No. I mean, you know, I worked, I didn't have to, I had opportunity. It was just when you're taking 50, 60, 70, $5 pills a day, and I worked
$300, bro, a day.
Bro, and then I had to knock myself out at the end of the night. Vicodin takes a lot of people down.
Yeah, you got to get Xanax.
Dude, amen. I had to get Xanax.
No, not amen, bro.
No,
amen.
No, the devil. So I had to get Xanax.
I know, bro. I know. It's all the devil, man. But you're clean and sober today, right?
For years, man, and I'm blessed.
With that being said, with everything you've went through due to addiction and getting arrested and shit, how did you get from that part of your life to where you are today? How'd you do it?
Oh, I had to stumble, man. I came out of prison with 4 years of supervised release, and I was nailing it. I was flawless on it. And I met a girl that was getting her doctorate, and she got a residency spot. She was doing her schooling in Kalamazoo at the university. She got a residency spot down in Asheville, North Carolina, my last 8 months on supervision. And so they thought she, you know, she was a good influence in my life. And, you know, they liked that relationship. She was very good, man. I blew it in the playoffs, hardcore.
Okay.
Yeah, I blew it. And my one stumble blew it. But, you know, she forgave me, and she was a supporter too. So, you know, I'll always love her for that. But life goes on, you know. So, getting back to it, I was out for.
Well, how did you get to where you are now though? So like the last couple of years of your life, like how did you get from somebody that's addicted to drugs going to federal prison to now obviously being clean and sober and living, you know, a decent life? Like what were the steps that you took?
Very easy, man. I hung with a clique of my friends from high school that we always walked that thin line in school, you know, and as we got into college and got older, some went to college, some started businesses, but we all stuck around. And then cocaine hit. And, you know, I had some buddies that were moving around coke, and I got into that whole scene for a little while, and I didn't really like it. It wasn't my forte, you know, getting into the painkillers. Well, your question was, how did you get to where you're at right now? Right.
Yeah. Like, how did you stop doing drugs, man, and live a successful life?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is crazy, man. So, you know, when I came home, I cut all those people out of my life, and I cut them out of my life completely. And then I only surrounded myself with people that I was a little bit ashamed to go and approach. But when I came out of prison, man, I came out not arrogant, but I came out with my head held high. Like, man, I beat that beast, you know, and I'm going to go back to being the same dude that I was. It was respected, but I understood that I was going to have to earn it. So I surrounded myself in my work environment and in my everyday life environment with people that were going forward, that weren't using drugs, that were doing business owners, successful people that cared. And then you'll find this crazy, but, you know, I ended up getting married, my only marriage. And I ended up marrying, the daughter of the ex head of the city SWAT and narcotics unit. Dude, Talk about a crazy first dinner.
Bro, I can't even imagine, bro. Well, that's for another episode, man. So
Yeah.
would you say though that the main thing you did was just stop like people, places, and things as far as like straightening your life out?
Yeah, I saw during that time when I came home, I started seeing my dad slip a little bit. His struggle was about 10 years with Alzheimer's before he passed last year. And that was my best friend, man. And so I knew him better than my mom did, you know, probably I was closer with him than my own mom, brother, and sister. So I could see something was going on, and it made me want to get my shit together, you know, and all the other blessings that I'd realized that happened in my life, just kind of in hindsight, I started seeing them. And I was like, man, you know, you've gotten slapped on the wrist your whole life. You finally went in. But here's what I didn't do. And I hope some people can take something away from this. When I came out, man, I never did anything to address why I started using drugs in the first place. When I got out of prison, I hung on by a string. There wasn't a day that went by. And I worked in I've been in sales for like 17 years. And I worked in pretty high pressure sales. And there wasn't a day that went by where I didn't want to escape some of those days by using drugs. But I just knew that if I did, I just, based on watching friends go downhill and based on what had happened to me, I knew exactly who had a bed for me and a place to stay, or I was going to end up dead. Because I mean, I had a couple nasty overdoses too, where I can, between the accident and a couple overdoses, people can say what they want and they can fabricate stories, man, but you're looking at someone who shouldn't be sitting here right now, you know? So you start thinking about,
I know.
yeah. And I don't know your whole story, man, but I, on the stuff I've read and stuff, I think you can kind of like relate maybe.
Yeah. I can definitely relate to your story, man. Honestly, I relate to a lot of people's stories that I interview, but yeah, more so yours, because of the opiates and the drugs and everything. But
yeah, man, I appreciate being on here. I think what you're doing is great because people need to hear about it. And, I wouldn't mind doing like a follow-up if it'd be cool with you to talk about.
We could definitely do something like that. I'm going to do that with a lot of guests. So if you guys are watching, I'm going to bring people on I've interviewed before and do like checkups, every year or something like that, to kind of do like a reunion thing. But we're going to have him back on the channel and probably do a part 2 in the future. Hey man, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. I know, you're putting your shit out there for everybody to hear. So,
I've heard it before.
Yeah. Right. So, but big salute to you, man, for turning your life around and getting off drugs and trying to spread the message of hope, man. So I salute that, man. I'm about all that. So I appreciate you.
Yeah, brother. I appreciate you too, man. And keep doing what you're doing because people need to hear this stuff, man. Yeah,
we're going to keep doing it, man. If you're new and you're tuning in, man, do me a solid, hit that subscribe button and turn your post notifications on. And with that, it's DOC TV and we're out.